The glow from my laptop turned my room into a confessional. The number on my bank app wasn't low. It was $0. For a long second, I couldn't swallow. The trip I'd saved for since freshman year evaporated like steam. I scrolled the ledger, transfers, regular, deliberate. My chest tightened, breath hitching as if the room had lost air. A name throbbed behind my eyes. Her, not a stranger, not a hacker, my stepmother. Every emergency she'd borrowed for, every "I'll pay you Friday," replayed with cruel clarity. The betrayal wasn't a stab. It was quiet surgery done in my sleep. I stared at the wall where my graduation photo hung. Me between Dad and her, all of us smiling with the same teeth. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I listened to the steady, surprising sound of my own heartbeat. It didn't sound broken. It sounded like a drum. If this was the moment my world ended, then it was also the moment I began. I closed the laptop and opened a notes page. Title, What I'll Do Next. The zero in my account wasn't emptiness. It was a countdown. Before money turned into a weapon, our house looked like a greeting card. Dad's laughter grew younger after he remarried. My stepmother, Leela, perfected warmth. Extra mashed potatoes on my plate, sticky notes on my mirror, proud of you. She learned my favorite latte, sat through my rants about calc, and told me my mother would be proud. I inhaled it like oxygen. Or maybe like perfume, sweet, light, and not meant to last. Tiny things bothered me, but I filed them as quirks. When I aced a brutal exam, Leela smiled and said, "Brains like your father's, what a gift." When I shared a dream of interning in DC, she tilted her head. Ambitious. Keep a realistic plan B. Nothing to fight over, nothing to name. But each comment rubbed raw, like shoes a half size wrong. If love is a house, I moved my furniture into hers. I believed I'd found the missing room. I didn't notice she kept her hand on the dimmer switch. Sometimes red flags are pastel, until the lights go out. It started with a chipped windshield. I hate to ask, Leela said, palm over her heart. The card's acting up. I'll Venmo you Friday. Friday came and tiptoed away. Then a dentist bill, a friend in a bind. Every story came pre-packaged with gratitude. You're saving us. And a promise with soft edges. I kept a spreadsheet titled Loans to Leela, color-coded and optimistic. Dad never heard the asks. She made sure of it. She'd catch me in doorways, the car idling, always late for something. "You're so responsible," she said, pressing my hand like a seal of approval. I told myself families float each other. I wanted to be the kind of daughter who says yes. But saying yes felt like stepping into a slow elevator with mirrors on every side. I could see myself from all angles, nodding, smiling, shrinking. Still, I pressed the button for up. When "thank you" sounds like gotcha, start counting. A joke about my outfit that made Dad laugh but made my neck burn. A story I told that Leela fixed while I was still finishing it. She called me tender-hearted, which sounded kind until it meant overreacting. If I pulled back, she pulled closer. Gift cards, takeout nights, a mother-daughter spa coupon left on my pillow. I learned her choreography. Praise when Dad was near, pinprick corrections when he wasn't. I rehearsed my own lines. It's fine. She means well. Be grateful. The truth is, I loved being loved. I loved Dad being happy more. One night, I caught Dad humming in the kitchen, wedding ring flashing under warm light, Leela's arms around his waist. That image became my boundary. I wouldn't ruin that glow. I didn't notice how often I stood in the dark to protect it. Abusers don't always slam doors. Sometimes they dim lamps. It started with a chipped windshield. I hate to ask, Leela said, palm over her heart. The card's acting up. I'll Venmo you Friday. Friday came and tiptoed away. then a dentist bill, a friend in a bind. Every story came pre-packaged with gratitude, "You're saving us," and a promise with soft edges. I kept a spreadsheet titled Loans to Leela, color-coded and optimistic. Dad never hurt the asks. She made sure of it. She'd catch me in doorways, the car idling, always late for something. "You're so responsible," she said, pressing my hand like a seal of approval. I told myself families float each other. I wanted to be the kind of daughter who says yes. But saying yes felt like stepping into a slow elevator with mirrors on every side. I could see myself from all angles, nodding, smiling, shrinking. Still, I pressed the button for up. When "thank you" sounds like "gotcha," start counting. A joke about my outfit that made Dad laugh but made my neck burn. A story I told that Leela fixed while I was still finishing it. She called me tender-hearted, which sounded kind until it meant overreacting. If I pulled back, she pulled closer. Gift cards, takeout nights, a mother-daughter spa coupon left on my pillow. I learned her choreography. Praise when Dad was near, pinprick corrections when he wasn't. I rehearsed my own lines. "It's fine. She means well. Be grateful." The truth is, I loved being loved. I loved Dad being happy more. One night, I caught Dad humming in the kitchen, wedding ring flashing under warm light, Leela's arms around his waist. That image became my boundary. I wouldn't ruin that glow. I didn't notice how often I stood in the dark to protect it. Abusers don't always slam doors. Sometimes they dim lamps. My Costa Rica fund lived in a high-yield account with an ugly bank URL and unglamorous deposits, babysitting, weekend shifts at the bakery, birthday checks, tips from tutoring. I named the account Bridge Money, a bridge to everything I promised my younger self: zipline courage, new Spanish, ocean blue faith in my adult life. When senior year roared in, the deposit deadline became a dotted circle on my calendar. I subtracted expenses like a game. I could almost feel humidity on my skin. Leela called it cute that I kept spreadsheets. "You and your little charts," she teased, tossing my hair as if I were 6. Dad told me I was more organized than most adults. I let his words drown out hers. On a Thursday night, the bakery closed early. I came home smelling like frosting, humming, and opened my laptop to move the final transfer. The page loaded. My smile didn't. Numbers stared back, bald and cruel. Some bridges don't collapse. They're quietly taken apart. My cursor shook as I scrolled. The withdrawals were spaced like footfalls in a hallway, regular, patient, coming closer. Each transfer had a new memo line, generic as blank walls. I printed the statements with hands that didn't feel like hands. The printer hummed a lullaby for a baby that wasn't there. I walked the pages to my bed and laid them out like bones. Together, they made a skeleton, money stripped clean, month after month. A pattern is a story that refuses to lie. Mine told the same truth each time I blinked. I wasn't ready to say her name out loud. I whispered it into my pillow anyway. Lila. The ceiling didn't crack, the earth didn't open, but the room tilted, and that tilt felt permanent. When the facts hold still, the excuses start running. I found Lila on the sofa with a hardcover novel and a blanket that matched the throw pillows. "Can we talk?" I asked, throat raw. She smiled, page-fingered. "Always." I held up my phone, the ledger, the transfers, the zero. "My account is empty," I said. "Did you use it?" Her smile fell off her face without touching the floor. "How dare you?" she answered, voice low, precise. The book closed like a gavel. "I have given you everything. Time, love, stability. You think I'd steal from you? You sound paranoid. This is what jealousy looks like." She stood, and the room shrank. She named my flaws with the ease of someone reading a grocery list. Sensitive, dramatic, ungrateful. She said my grief over my mother made me clingy. She blinked wet eyes when Dad walked in, and suddenly I was the storm system overhead. I left before I drowned. Gaslighting is theft that keeps on stealing. The next days slid past like panes of glass. I could see my life but couldn't touch it. At school, I copied notes my brain didn't keep. At night, I tried to sleep but replayed the scene in the living room, each line sharper, each breath louder. I Googled what to do when a family member steals. The results were clinical and cold. I searched betrayal trauma. That phrase fit my chest like a key. The symptoms weren't a mystery, they were a map. Hypervigilance, insomnia, numbness punctured by rage. I wasn't broken, I was injured. I printed one page that said, "Document everything." I bought a manila folder and labeled it Receipts. I added the bank statements, a timeline, and a list of her emergency asks. Under next steps, I wrote, "Tell Dad. Find therapist. Freeze access." For the first time since the zero, I felt the ground. You cannot heal what you're still gaslighting yourself about. I waited for Saturday morning when Dad made omelets. The kitchen smelled like pepper and butter and safety. I handed him the folder. He read in standing silence. His shoulders dropped. "This must be a mistake," he said softly, as if the papers might hear. I asked her, I said. She denied. She called me jealous. I watched a man choose between two truths that couldn't coexist. He sat down, omelet untended, and pressed fingers to his eyes. "Let me talk to her," he whispered. I wanted him to say, "I believe you." Instead, I got a promise to investigate. He hugged me long and tight, and if love were enough, the ledger would have refilled. Lila didn't come into the kitchen. The omelet burned. We opened all the windows and still the smoke stayed. When love is real and evidence is real, someone has to break. That night, she cried. Of course she cried. Dad's voice was low behind their door. Hers traveled, ragged, righteous, rehearsed. She said I'd misread a bank site. She said I held on to grief like a weapon. She said teenagers lie. She didn't say I didn't do it. She said everything around that sentence and let the absence do the work. Dad slept on the sofa. In the morning, he made coffee for 2 and left the second mug untouched. "We need time," he said, as if time changes arithmetic. I took my receipts folder to the public library and asked a clerk for a notary. I wrote a statement of what I'd found and signed my name in ink that bled on cheap paper. It was the ugliest, beautiful thing I'd done. When I left, the sun felt like a decision. If the truth has no door, build one with paper. My therapist's name was Jess. Her office had soft chairs and a bowl of polished stones. She asked how I slept. I laughed. She asked where I felt the fear. I tapped my sternum. She said, "Your body is doing its job, keeping you alive in a crisis that won't end." She gave me the phrase betrayal trauma out loud. She explained the brain like a house with alarms that wouldn't shut off. We practiced breathing until I could feel my ribs move again. She didn't call Lila a monster. She called her unsafe. The difference mattered. Monsters are fairy tales. Unsafe is a plan. Jess asked what safety would look like this week. I said, separate finances, a lock on my door, a friend I could text at 2 a.m. I left with homework. Notice your triggers. Name what you need. For once, homework felt like medicine. I changed passwords, I moved savings to a new bank, I set alerts for any charge over $10. I asked the school counselor about emergency grants for the Costa Rica trip. even if the dream felt too tender to touch. At home, I spoke in short sentences that didn't invite edits. When Leela asked if I could float a bill, I said no. When she asked to borrow my car, I said no. The word felt like a pebble in my mouth at first, then like a seed. She adjusted fast. Compliments sharpened to critiques. She told Dad I seemed cold. She tilted her head at me and sighed, "I'm trying so hard." But I had a rule now. I would not be coached by the person who broke me. I placed a copy of my notarized statement and bank printouts in Dad's briefcase pocket. He didn't mention it, neither did I. We were all talking, even when we weren't. Sometimes healing sounds like one syllable: no. People who curate their image forget the camera can turn around. Leela bragged to a friend on speaker that she'd handled a bill creatively. She didn't know I was in the hallway. The word snapped like a twig underfoot. I recorded the rest: her laughter, a mention of using the kids' cash temporarily, a promise to fix it before anyone noticed. My hands shook, but this time it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline that knew the route. I saved the audio to a cloud folder titled Bridge Money. I sent a copy to Jess, one to my private email, and one to a friend with instructions not to open it unless I said the phrase, "open water." I went for a run. The sky looked less like a ceiling and more like a door. Abusers narrate, evidence narrates better. I asked Dad to meet me at the coffee shop across from his office. No house, no kitchen, no sheaf of emotions between us. I slid him wired earbuds and pressed play. He listened to Leela's voice travel across a tiny ocean into our cups. He didn't look at me when it ended. He looked at the window, at a woman passing with a stroller, at his own reflection. Then he said the words I had held an ache for. "I believe you." He put his head in his hands and exhaled a sound I'd never heard from him, part grief, part apology, part relief. "What do we do?" I asked. He said, "We protect you." I walked home lighter and heavier at once. Belief is a door that swings both ways. It lets in wind and also lets you leave. Validation isn't closure, but it's the only road to it. Jess helped us draft steps: document, secure, confront with a witness. We picked Aunt May, Dad's sister, a kindergarten teacher whose voice could soothe or slice. We wrote questions and stuck to them. Did you make these transfers? From which device? Why? We wrote outcomes: repayment plan, separate accounts, counseling, or, failing that, police report. The night before, I packed a backpack like for a test: receipts, audio, a small notebook, a pen that writes even when tilted. I added a granola bar because even justice gets hungry. When we arrived, Leela was arranging tulips. She smiled like photographs smile. Aunt May said hello in a tone that said, "We are not here for tulips." Dad read the first question. Leela picked up a stem and snapped it clean. She ran through the greatest hits: deflection, tears, anger, but the song sounded different with 3 people listening. I didn't speak until the end. Then I said, "I want my money back." Boundaries are just nouns until you enforce them. When Dad mentioned the audio, Leela stilled. She asked to hear it, then called it out of context. Aunt May asked what context would make using the kids' cash temporarily acceptable. Leela's eyes sharpened. "This is a witch hunt," she snapped, "and I'm done." She grabbed her purse and keys. Dad stepped aside. He didn't ask her to stay. The door closed without slamming. Somehow, that was worse. The silence afterward was strange, clean, and echoing. Aunt May wrote a note of the agreement we'd tried to make: repayment schedule, a deadline for an apology, a plan for counseling. She left it on the table under a tulip head and texted a photo to all of us. I went to my room and cried for the family I'd lived in like a rented house. Sometimes the truest apology is the door that doesn't reopen. Leela moved to a friend's place. Dad moved through the house like a man learning to walk after a collision. He installed new passwords, called the bank, and met with a lawyer who said phrases like restitution and civil action. I learned to cook the way my mother had, following recipes written in her slanted handwriting. The kitchen began to sound like us again. At night, I still startled at nothing. Jess taught me grounding. 5 things I could see, 4 I could touch, 3 I could hear. I stacked them like blocks until my heart slowed. A text pinged from an unknown number. "You've ruined everything. Happy now?" I saved it in receipts and answered nothing. Silence can be a weapon or a sanctuary. I chose sanctuary. Healing is loud on the inside and quiet on purpose. The Costa Rica coordinator emailed, a final extension, 48 hours. I closed my eyes and saw blue rainforest sky. Then I opened my bank app and saw the truth. I wrote back, "I'll try." I sold my prom dress on a resale app and my vintage camera to a classmate whose parents collected such things. Dad added what he could without toppling his own budget. Aunt May slipped me an envelope and said, "Consider this an investment in your lungs." That night, Lila transferred $500 with a memo line that read, "To stop your lies." I moved it to a holding account and added the screenshot to receipts. Jess texted, "A breadcrumb from the forest's edge." I slept for 4 hours without dreams. When abusers say hush, document louder. I didn't make the trip. I made something else. I biked to the lake at sunrise with a thermos of cinnamon coffee and a library book. I painted my nails the shade my mother loved. I learned a new Spanish idiom from a YouTube teacher in Costa Rica and let it taste sweet on my tongue. Dad and I started pasta Sundays. We burned the first sauce and ate it anyway. We laughed in a way that didn't need an audience. Sometimes, grief sat with us like a relative who won't go home. We let it. We set another plate and didn't feed it lies. If you can't chase the big dream yet, grow 10 small ones. Months later, the lawyer called, a mediation date. Lila would be there. So would her lawyer, who'd cost more than all the emergencies combined. I took the day off school and ironed a shirt my mother had kept for interviews. I packed receipts and a new list. What I'm worth, not in dollars, but in boundaries. My sleep, my trust, my future plans, my name. In the waiting room, Lila wore neutral colors and a necklace I'd given her for Christmas. I didn't grieve the necklace. I grieved the girl who chose it. We settled, not for everything, but enough. A repayment plan the court would enforce. A written admission that used lawyer words instead of the one I wanted. Sorry, but words that pinned responsibility to paper. On the bus home, I opened my notes app and retitled the folder, Bridge Money. Not because I had crossed the bridge yet, but because I was building it again, beam by beam, breath by breath. Closure is a toolbox, not a door. Mediation didn't fix the air at home, it only labeled it. Dad and I made a chart on the fridge, bills, due dates, his account and mine, arrows that never crossed. We took down the couple photos without a ceremony, just 2 quiet people choosing blank space. When mail arrived for Lila, we stacked it in a shoebox and wrote "Forward" in block letters. I changed my lock with Dad standing in the doorway holding the screwdriver like a relic. Night still had edges. When fear flared, I stood in the kitchen with my palms on the cool counter and breathed until my ribs lowered. Sometimes, Dad joined me, matching pace. "We're okay," he'd murmur, and I would almost believe him. On Sundays, Aunt May came with lasagna and a crossword. We filled little squares with little answers, and something about that felt like proof. Even complicated things can be solved 1 letter at a time. Peace doesn't arrive, it's assembled. I drafted a letter to Lila because silence isn't emptiness, it's pressure. I wrote about Costa Rica, the bakery, my mother's recipe cards. I wrote the sentence I wanted most to be true. You taught me something anyway. I did not write, "I forgive you." Forgiveness, Jess said, is not the only exit. Closure can be a window. I read the letter aloud in therapy and then folded it into my journal. "Why keep it?" Jess asked. I said, "To remind myself I said the truth, even if she never hears it." She nodded. We practiced a boundary phrase for if our paths crossed. "I don't discuss finances or feelings with you. Please contact my attorney." The words tasted like metal, but held. That night, I burned spaghetti and laughed until I cried. Dad waved a towel at the smoke alarm as if shooing a mosquito, and the beep, beep, beep somehow felt like a heartbeat returning. Not every truth is mail. Some truths are mirrors. I took a job at the community center, tutoring middle schoolers in math. The pay was small, the dividends were not. My students arrived prickly with everything that makes 13 hard, then brightened when numbers lined up. "You make it make sense," Mateo told me, pencil tapping like Morse code. I put the compliment in the pocket where hope lives. The director, Miss Alvarez, ran the place like a ship. She asked why I liked spreadsheets, and I said, "Because they don't lie." She offered extra hours in the office, grant tracking, attendance, little budgets that stayed true if you told them how. I learned the thrill of balance, columns that met in the middle like hands. After work, the gym echoed with basketball and kids in loud shoes. I sat on the bleachers and let noise carry me. Healing didn't have to be hushed to be real. Meaning is money that doesn't fit in a bank. The first time a cashier asked debit or credit too brightly, my vision blurred. My body remembered before my brain did. I stepped aside, breathing the 5-4-3-2-1 Jess taught me. 5 things I see: candy bars, a bent sign, a plant that wasn't real, a man yawning, a scuff on the floor. 4 I feel: the strap on my shoulder, cool air, rough receipt, my own wrist. The world returned in color, not alarm red. Triggers are tripwires over old brown. I started mapping mine. If a bank ad came up on YouTube, I clicked skip, like saving my own life. If someone joked about borrowing, I excused myself. I wrote a phrase on an index card and kept it by my keys. "Now is safe." I read it before leaving, like a blessing you don't need to believe in for it to hold. The Notes app on my phone filled with things that worked. Practical magic, the kind my mother would have called common sense. Healing is boring until you realize boring is peace. We were sorting laundry when it happened. He found one of Mom's old t-shirts in the back of a drawer and sat down on the bed like the mattress had turned to water. "I should have seen it," he said, voice threaded with threadbare grief. I wanted happy so badly, I kept measuring the house by the porch light. I didn't want to be gracious. I wanted to say, "Me too," and "How could you?" and hold me all at once. He kept speaking. "I'm sorry I didn't say, 'I believe you' first. I'm sorry you had to be brave alone for even an hour." We did the adult thing and folded towels with red eyes. After, he made hot chocolate the way he used to when I had fevers. Tiny marshmallows that melted too fast. Apologies don't rewind tape, but they can turn down the volume on static. We clinked mugs like glasses and didn't toast to anything, which felt right. Some sorries are scaffolding you still have to climb. Each month, a payment landed from Lila through the court portal, numbers that looked medicinal rather than generous. The memo lines were blank, which felt like honesty at last. I transferred the money into bridge money and refused to imagine the day it would equal what was taken. Jess said, "Justice that arrives in installments still counts." A text came from an unknown number. "We could have fixed this privately." I screenshot it, uploaded to receipts, and let the weight slide onto paper. Then I blocked the number. My phone felt lighter in my hand, like a tool again rather than a leash. At the community center, Miss Alvarez asked if I'd help write a small grant for a reading room. I said yes without asking whether I was ready. Sometimes readiness is a retroactive label you award yourself for showing up. Closure can be monthly. Dignity is daily. Sloan, different Sloan than the one from other stories, my Sloan, showed up with road trip playlists and fries in the passenger seat. We drove nowhere special with the windows down and yelled the choruses of songs we pretended to hate. She asked real questions, the kind that leave room. Are you sleeping? Does school still feel like yours? Do you want me to ask about it or ask about anything else? When I said anything else, she asked about sneakers and which constellation looks most like spaghetti. We laughed too hard at nothing, and it was medicine. Unlicensed, wildly effective. She kept a spare hoodie in her trunk for me, in case the weather forgets itself, which somehow became a metaphor we needed. On bad days, she texted, "Forecast says, remember you're not alone." I saved those messages in a folder labeled weather because it pleased me. Find the friend who knows when you want silence and when you want fries. I wrote to the Costa Rica program director and told the truth, cleaned of drama but not of honesty. I said I hadn't made it, but the seed was still planted. I asked if they had alumni who would Zoom with students who couldn't go. She replied within a day with 3 names and a question. Would I help host a virtual series for kids at our community center? Suddenly, the trip wasn't gone. It had changed shape. We set up 3 Tuesday nights in the gym with a projector and stale popcorn. A biologist taught us the word epiphyte and made it sound like a spell. A guide described mornings so green they squeaked. We learned beginner Spanish phrases and practiced without shame. The kids cheered when the Wi-Fi held. I watched 7th graders tilt their heads the way I do when my world expands. Sometimes the bridge you build leads other people across first. At the grocery store, I rounded an aisle and there she was, Leela by the oranges, turning a fruit in her palm like she was checking its oxygen. She saw me and blinked like waking hurts. We stood a cart apart. I heard Jess in my head, script, boundary, exit. She said, "You look thin." I said, "I don't discuss feelings or finances with you. Please contact my attorney." My voice was calm and surprised me. She flushed. "You've made me into a villain," she whispered. I didn't answer because that wasn't a question, and because answers are contracts. I pushed my cart toward the cereal. My hands shook only a little. In the bread aisle, I cried into the shelf of wheat like it was a shoulder. I texted Dad, "Seen her, okay." He replied with a heart and "proud of you." Pride felt like scaffolding again, except this time I could feel the boards under my feet. Boundary kept equals nervous system taut. By spring, our house sounded different. The dishwasher did its tired rattle. The porch swing squeaked like a hinge to a better door. I pinned a calendar on my wall titled Applications, Scholarships, Deadlines, and started filling future blanks. The community center became my second address. Kids yelled Miss Numbers when I walked in, which I pretended to hate and secretly loved. Miss Alvarez asked if I'd present at a small city meeting about youth programs. I wrote bullet points, practiced eye contact with the mirror, and stood at a podium where microphones looked like curious snakes. I told the council that safe places and honest ledgers turn kids into citizens. I didn't say I learned that the hard way. I didn't need to. Afterward, a local accountant shook my hand and said, "Ever think about finance?" I thought about how much I liked making columns merry. I thought about how truth likes ledgers. "Yes," I said. Purpose is a repayment plan your soul recognizes. At home, Dad started leaving tiny proofs of care. A fresh pack of sticky notes, a bouquet of daisies by my coffee mug, a text that read, "You've always been brave. Now you also know you are." He began therapy too, a fact he announced the way some people announce a new hobby, awkwardly, with hope. "It's like joining a gym for the brain," he said. "Everything's sore in a good way." We opened Mom's box of letters and read one each Friday. In her looping script, she wrote about rainy day picnics on the living room floor and the advice she meant to give me at 16. She didn't know she was writing emergency rations for a future she wouldn't see. We ate them slowly. I took a photo of one line, "Be gentle with the part of you that wants to bolt." I taped it to my mirror. Every morning, I looked at it like a street sign. Resilience grows in the compost of ordinary tear. The lawyer filed a petition when payments lagged. The court issued a nudge with a bite, and the direct deposits resumed. It felt bureaucratic, not romantic, a relief. Justice doesn't need violins. It needs a routing number. Leela's attorney proposed a lump sum settlement, smaller than owed, but larger than expected. We accepted after 3 cups of kitchen silence coffee and a call with Jess about the math of peace. When the wire arrived, I watched the numbers like sunrise, slow, certain, gently shocking. I moved a portion into bridge money and a portion into start life, the account for what comes next. I didn't post about it. The story I was telling now didn't require an audience, only a witness or two and my own breath counting. I bought myself one expensive thing, running shoes that promised better knees. Some purchases are apologies to your body for what your head put it through. I applied for a summer internship at a small accounting firm, spreadsheets as nouns and verbs. The interview room smelled like lemon cleaner and ambition. Mr. Patel asked, "Why numbers?" I said, "Because when they're honest, they're kind." He laughed softly like I'd surprised him. He handed me a test ledger with 3 purposeful errors. I found them, and one he hadn't intended. "We'll be in touch," he said, which adults say when they mean yes and want to feel mysterious. I walked out into hard sun with the sensation of a zipper closing. Something aligned. Sloan drove us for celebratory milkshakes and convinced the diner to play our least favorite song. We danced in our booth anyway. That night, I wrote a paragraph to my future self. You did not become hard. You became clear. I slept with the window cracked and dreamed of nothing particular, which felt like luxury. Clarity is softness with a spine. Leela emailed through the attorney, a request to meet, to talk like family. Jess and Dad both suggested no. I wrote back one sentence: all communication should remain through counsel. Then I shut my laptop and watched my hands not shake. The hardest part of boundaries isn't saying them, it's surviving their echo. That weekend, I led the community center reading hour. A second grader named Betrayal climbed into the beanbag next to me and whispered, "Sometimes my stomach hurts when my mom's boyfriend yells." I didn't fix it. I didn't pretend. I said, "Your body is smart. Do you have a grown-up you can tell?" She nodded. We practiced breathing together, hands on bellies, counting. We read a book about a bear who built a fort. Afterward, she drew me a fort with my name on it. I put the drawing in receipts too, evidence that the world also deposits. The strongest no makes room for the gentlest yes. Graduation smelled like grass and sunscreen and future. I walked across a stage in shoes that pinched and shook hands with people who would not remember my name tomorrow, which was fine. I planned to remember my own. Dad's whistle carried above the crowd like a neon arrow pointing me back to where home lives. At the party, Aunt May brought cupcakes and framed my acceptance letter to state. Ms. Alvarez popped in with a gift card and a hug that cracked my back. Sloan played a slideshow she pretended I didn't know about. Baby me in overalls, toothless grin, middle school me with unfortunate bangs, now me standing. When the sun slanted, we sat on the porch steps and passed a bottle of bubbles like we were 8. The bubbles caught light and then let it go. Short lives, no tragedy. Later, I opened the fridge and saw our lists on the door, still neat. Order as kindness, structure as love. Sometimes the ceremony is just the universe saying, next. The dorm smelled like new paint and pizza, a hopeful combination. Dad carried the heavier boxes even though I said I could, because he's a father, and some instincts are stubborn. He cried only once, into a dish towel, which we both agreed was an appropriate container for tears. My roommate, Jazz, arrived with a plant named Kevin and a calmness I envied. We made our beds, taped a map to the wall, and wrote a cleaning schedule like adults who believed in brooms. That night, the hall echoed with laughter and faraway loneliness. I texted Dad, "Safe, love you." He replied with a photo of the dog we don't have. We laughed over nothing and everything. Before sleeping, I put Mom's note on my desk. "Be gentle with the part of you that wants to bolt." I whispered, "Stay," to the air and to myself. Independence is a dorm room with a nightlight. Mr. Patel paired me with an accountant named Renee, who wore sneakers with suits and said numbers like they had personalities. She handed me spreadsheets the way some people hand out cookies. "Find what's off," she said, and left me with a ledger that looked calm until I asked it questions. 2 invoices had identical timestamps, impossible if entered honestly. The discrepancy was small enough to hide in rounding, small enough to be deliberate. I wrote a memo. Observed anomalies suggest copy-paste entries. Recommend vendor verification. Renee read it and grinned. "Welcome to the part where integrity makes you unpopular," she said cheerfully. We called the vendor. An error, they claimed. A corrected invoice arrived within the hour. I felt that old drum in my chest again. Not panic, purpose. Numbers tell on people, and if you listen long enough, they tell you where to stand. The truth doesn't raise its voice, it repeats itself. Midterms found me jittery and awake at 3 a.m., the way grief used to find me. I went to the campus counseling center and used words I'd learned to carry: triggered, hypervigilant, boundary fatigue. The counselor nodded like a metronome and taught me a script for late-night spirals. Name it, frame it, tame it. Name, panic. Frame, old alarm, new room. Tame, 5 breaths, cold water, text a friend by pre-agreement. She asked if I wanted a support group. I said, maybe. I've learned that maybe is the on-ramp to yes. I joined 6 students on a Tuesday evening, all of us with different stories that rhymed. We didn't trade trauma like baseball cards. We traded survival tricks. I left lighter than the snacks justified. On my way back, the campus bell tower chimed, and for once, it didn't sound like warning. Community is the opposite of gaslight. Unknown number called again, but this time it was actually known, Leela's new phone through her attorney. I let it go to voicemail, then played it on speaker with Jess on Zoom. "I'm in a program," Leela's voice said. "They say I should make amends. I can't change the past, but I can acknowledge harm. I'm sorry." The words were correct, but arrived like a package with no return address. Jess asked how my body felt hearing it. I ran inventory. Shoulders low, jaw unclenched, heart steady. "Neutral," I said, surprised. "That feels like a miracle." We discussed responses and chose none. Amends isn't a password, it's a process. If it was real, it would continue without my participation. If it wasn't, silence would starve it. I archived the voicemail in receipts, not out of pettiness, but principle. The folder had become something else over time. Not a museum of harm, but a record of how I refused to disappear. Apologies matter most to the person who says them, unless they change. Miss Alvarez burst into the office with a whoop that made the printer flinch. "We got it," she said, waving an email. "The city funded our reading room, shelving, beanbags, a rug that looked like a map of constellations." She said my spreadsheets made the proposal unembarrassingly competent, which became the best compliment I've ever received. We painted one Saturday with volunteers who laugh-sang along to a playlist that confused decades. Brielle arrived with glitter on her cheeks and helped label bins. When we were done, the room smelled like new pages and orange cleaner. The kids ran hands over spines like petting gentle animals. I sat in the doorway later, exhausted and useful. "You're a natural," Miss Alvarez said, meaning not numbers, but belonging. I filed the moment in a new mental drawer labeled Evidence of Future. Do work that leaves a room better than it found you. Dad came to campus for lunch and walked like he'd just learned to carry joy without dropping it. We ate tacos on a bench, and he told me he joined a Saturday hiking group. Turns out, trees don't need me to fix them, he said, which was both funny and true. He asked about Renee and Mr. Patel and whether Kevin the plant was still alive. Barely, I said. We're negotiating son. He got quiet. I'm seeing a lawyer about the divorce finalization, he said. The words sat between us like a folded sweater, soft, necessary. I waited longer than I should, he added. I thought time would make a choice for me. I squeezed his hand. Choices are muscles, they only strengthen by use. Back at my dorm, Dad hugged me twice, once like a father, and once like a man grateful to be one. After he left, I watered Kevin and whispered, grow anyway. Freedom often looks like paperwork and tacos. On a rainy Thursday, I almost texted Leela a picture of the reading room. The urge startled me, proof that nostalgia is a magician who works with smoke. I didn't hit send. Instead, I texted Sloan. Remind me why we don't show our ghosts our gardens. She answered, because they'll ask for the keys. I wrote the text I wished I could send. I'm doing well. Your absence is expensive and also freeing. Then I deleted it. The reading room wasn't proof for anybody else. It was a mirror for me. That night, I dreamed of Costa Rica again, but not of missing it, of planning a trip after graduation, this time with my own money and my own breath steady. Healing isn't generous to the wound, it's generous to the scar. Jazz dragged me to a campus open mic. I planned to clap politely. Instead, I read a piece I'd written about ledgers and lullabies. My hands shook on the first line and then remembered me. After, a woman with bright earrings stopped me. You write like you balance, she said. Ever consider the writing minor? I laughed until she handed me a brochure. I read it 3 times and circled Financial Narrative Seminar because I like when 2 words argue and then shake hands. We ate late-night pancakes with friends who argued about syrup viscosity as if the world depended on it, which might be a definition of safety. I walked back under a sky that needed more stars and didn't care. Enough is a kind of abundant. Let a detour prove you're not lost. The day the final payment posted, I was in the campus library under a lamp that made everything feel curated. My phone buzzed. Deposit received. My breath left in a long exhale I didn't know I'd been saving. I opened Bridge Money and stared not at the total, but at the shape of it. Restored, earned, complicated. I transferred a slice to a travel fund named Future Mornings and a slice to Emergency Yes for when life needs a fast kindness. Then I closed the app and wrote a sentence on an index card. You built a life where stolen things cannot stay. I did not celebrate with glitter or loudness. I went for a run in my good shoes and counted my steps. When I got back, I stood under hot water and cried without narrative. The tears felt less like grief and more like rinsing. Completion is quiet on purpose. Mr. Patel asked if I'd be willing to speak at a high school career day about ethics and finance. You're oddly passionate about receipts, he smiled. I said yes before anxiety could negotiate. At the event, rows of teenagers pretended not to listen. I told them numbers become stories whether or not we admit it. I told them integrity isn't a virtue you dust off for big moments. It's a habit you practice on small ones. After, a girl in a hoodie came up and whispered, "My stepdad uses my mom's account. She says it's temporary." I gave her a resource card and the sentence that saved me more than once. Document everything. Tell someone safe. She nodded like writing it down inside her. I walked out into sun that felt like applause I didn't need to hear. Teach the thing you needed at 15. A postcard arrived at Dad's house addressed to both of us, a photograph of a coastline that could have been anywhere. On the back, in tidy print, Lila wrote, "I am in recovery. I'm working on not being the worst thing I did. I won't contact you again unless invited. I hope you're well." There was no return address. Dad called and read it to me. We sat in our separate kitchens listening to the same distant waves. "How do you feel?" he asked. I examined the answer like a stone. "Grateful for the boundary," I said, "and for the sentence about not being the worst thing." He hummed, "We aren't either." We tucked the postcard into a folder not labeled receipts. Maybe records of weather. Some storms are names, some are just rain that finally leaves. Sometimes closure is a stamp and the choice not to reply. I opened a spreadsheet titled Costa Rica and filled cells with dates that fit around finals, fares that hurt less with each calculation, hostels with reviews that mentioned safety and coffee. I emailed the program director, now a friend, and asked for recommendation on places where a solo traveler can learn and not feel alone. She sent a list and a blessing. Sloan begged to come. We made a pact. If the budget allowed, she'd meet me for the last 5 days. I booked the ticket using future mornings and cried onto my keyboard like a cliché and didn't care. When the confirmation email arrived, I printed it and taped it above my desk with Mom's note. 2 papers, one old, one new, both saying "go" in voices I trusted. Some dreams arrive late and exactly on time. Dad drove me to the airport and asked 14 times if I had my passport. I had it 19. At security, he hugged me in a way that said every age I've ever been. "Send photos," he said, "even of food." I promised obnoxious documentation. On the plane, I tucked my journal into the seat pocket and wrote a simple itinerary. Wake, learn, notice, rest. The flight attendant asked if I wanted pretzels or cookies. "Both," I said, and it felt like a thesis. As the plane lifted, I pictured the first time I saw the zero, and the first time I saw the repayment, and the first time I saw myself as someone who keeps herself safe. Clouds erased the city and returned it as a toy. I closed my eyes and let the engine sing. Takeoff is physics and forgiveness. In Costa Rica, the air felt touchable. Mornings were loud with birds that sounded like laughter. I stood on an actual bridge in a cloud forest, boards damp, hand on the rope rail. A guide taught me the word resiliencia and smiled when I repeated it, slow and sure. I sent Dad a video of mist rolling toward green and typed, "Made it." I met a woman traveling alone who carried a deck of poems. We traded lines like currency. I taught a kid at the hostel how to balance a day's budget for snacks and bus fare. He taught me a slang word that means friend who shows up with fruit. I wrote it on my arm with a pen until I could remember it without cheating. At sunset, I took a photo of my feet on the wooden planks and captioned it "Only for myself, bridge money." Then I put my phone away and just stood there, fully, finally. The bridge wasn't the trip, it was me. When I came back, the house smelled like basil. Dad had grown confidence in pots on the windowsill. We ate pasta and traded stories, the safe kind and the true kind. After dishes, I opened my laptop and closed the receipts folder for the first time without flinching. It would stay, an archive, not a shrine. I started classes for the writing minor. Renee promised more ledgers that need listening. Miss Alvarez texted a photo of kids sprawled on the constellation rug, reading as if gravity were optional. Sloan sent a selfie with a caption, "Forecast, you're loved." I printed a final index card for my mirror. "You rebuilt where you live." Beneath it, I taped Mom's line, now soft at the corners. I practiced being gentle with the part that still bolts, and firm with the part that opens doors without checking who's knocking. This isn't a story about being broken. It's a map of what happens after. I'm still walking it, steadily, loudly when needed, and with my hands free. The ending is not an exit, it's an address.